Welcome to Dare a New Belief, a place to discover what is possible for your life after the loss of a loved one, and where you will find inspiration, insight, support, and love, and hopefully a bit of laughter to help you through your day. Now, here's your host, Nada Hogan.
A New Belief, where you will find light and life, love and joy, healing, faith, and hope. A place where you get to believe in what is possible for your life. And today I have the great honor and privilege to have Donna Mathiowetz with me. Donna is an inspirational speaker and author and strives to leave a legacy of hope, healing, and forgiveness by sharing her story of loss, grief, and resiliency. She began working in the arena of loss and grief in 1997. Following the death of two teenage sons within 2 years of each other. Donna is the author of What Have You Done Since I Left? And A Journal for Your Journey. She has also created a card deck. And Donna has been married to a wonderful man, Dick, for 48 years. And they have 4 beautiful children, 3 very special grandchildren, and have fostered 3 children from 3 different countries. Donna, thank you for being here.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for asking me.
I'm thrilled to have you here and to dive into this. So I don't know you. So for the listeners to know, I don't know you. Most of the time I do know the people who I invite in, or at least I know something about them. And you were referred to me. And I was going to come to a book signing because you just released a new book and my schedule did not work out with your schedule. So I haven't even had a chance to have a conversation with you except for right now. So I'm thrilled to dive into this. But the first place I want to go is, how is it that you became an inspirational speaker and an author? I know that you had lost 2 sons. And if we could start there, because, in my story, that's how this whole podcast came about, is I lost my daughter 12 years ago. So can we start there with the tragedy of losing your son, Tim?
I sure can. Yes. I never aspired to be an author or an inspirational speaker, but sometimes life circumstances takes us to places we had never thought about, and getting there by way of losing 2 children wouldn't be the route that I would have, of course, chosen to be able to be where I am. But so our journey of grief and loss began. It was 1992, so at the time we're recording all this, it's 28 years ago, more than 28 years ago. We live in Hastings, Minnesota. At that time had 2 children. Our daughter Jill was 18, had just graduated from high school, and our son Tim was 16, a sophomore at the high school here in town. And this particular Friday night, Tim went to a party, a gathering with about a dozen other teens, which I always, that add on there, I always say a group of teenagers with all of them sharing many things, and one thing they shared was their yet-to-be developed brains, because they simply, the brain is not done growing at that age, and so I think that's part of what caused such a terrible ending to that night. But so the kids were there. There was some beer. And there was a 19-year-old acquaintance, and didn't know this young man before, but he carried a .44 caliber Magnum handgun. And I had talked to Tim at 8 o'clock that night on the phone, and an hour later he was shot and killed with that gun by the owner of the gun. So it put us into a world of unimaginable pain and grief and confusion. We're talking 28 years ago when this type of news was a phenomenon. We just didn't hear of it. Unfortunately, we all know where we are now, where we hear of it on a daily, sometimes multiple times a day, of these types of things happening. But it happened in little sleepy Hastings, a little community of 10,000 people, and it was unfortunately pretty newsworthy. And that made it hard too, because it was very, very public. Our pain was very public. But we began there, and we joined a group called Compassionate Friends, which is a huge international organization that is just for bereaved parents, and I'm sure you're aware of that group too, Nada.
Yeah.
And we went there for a while, over a year, but about a year and a half after Tim's death, we had the opportunity to become a family to a young boy, and this is a whole, I could speak another session just about how all this transpired, but we were asked to take in this boy. He was found in a Ukrainian orphanage. His name was Oleg, and he had cancer. And a friend of ours was there arranging for adoptions from there into the U.S., and she had met Oleg, and on another trip back realized that he was very sick, and she became very determined to get him out of the orphanage and to the U.S. and to find doctors. And so through an organization called Healing the Children, was able to find that everybody, all the puzzle pieces fit together, and we became part of that team of people who would make sure Oleg could come and have a place to be. And so he did, and that was a year and a half after Tim's death. So we saw him through, all the chemo. He was inpatient once a month for his chemo. He lived a full life. It was just very brief. He died 6.5 months later, after what looked like he was rallying and things might be going in our favor. And then, as cancer unfortunately does too often, it turned the other way, and we lost him. So we experienced this very sudden death of Tim, where I saw him off to school on a Friday morning. The next time I saw him was on a Monday afternoon, laying in his casket. And then we had Oleg, who I mothered him literally and figuratively to death. I got to do all for him that I was robbed of with Tim, just because of the circumstances. So it was quite an experience, and it threw us into a whole new world, of course, and meeting other people who had also lost children. And we then, about 5 years after the boys died, we became active and helped to organize, put together a grief support group right here in Hastings, and became, we were there every week and speaking and facilitating small groups. And and anyone, I think, who's been able to reach out and help someone else knows that there is healing in that too. It was part of what we needed to, because we were, light years ahead of some who just had suffered their loss last week. So, I think we knew people needed to see hope by us being there and appearing to be having adjusted somehow to a new normal, and could now get up and put one foot in front of the other most days, not every day, but most days. So that was our journey, and I've been doing this type of work ever since, and in a little bigger way as I began to write the books. And the book you mentioned, What Have You Done Since I Left, that just actually came out about 6 weeks ago. So and it tells a lot more about the entire story of Oleg, and then we adopted a special needs child, and we fostered 3 children from foreign countries. And again, any of the above would never have been on my bucket list ever. I'm pretty sure, but because of course, don't we all have our own plan how it's all going to go, right? When it changes that drastically, it makes you rethink everything. And so we just chose a different way, and I really am grateful that I can take something like what I've just described and use it to help other people, because it doesn't feel quite so useless if we can use it to help someone else.
Absolutely. Oh, my goodness. And bless your heart. I mean, my heart just dropped. It's, wow. I mean, it's just the tragedy of losing a child that, and with a gun involved, I don't know why that just seems to add such a extra element of pain and depth to that. And I guess what I would like to ask you is, so after Tim's passing, how did you find yourself and your husband and the rest of your family? How were you able to come to terms with that in a way that was meaningful for all of you, and yet still able to be on the path of grief, because we still have to grieve. And I know there's days that we just don't get out of bed because we just can't.
That's
but
right.
obviously
That's right.
you were doing something, and I wonder, is it inner faith, or was it just your belief? What was it that helped you and your family move through this in the beginning?
I do think there was, we happened to live in a great community of people, and we had been involved in, a big mission trip that involved 12 churches, and so the faith community was huge for us. Not that, as we know, not that anything they could physically do to make it all better, but knowing they were there, and who knows how many hundreds of people were praying for us. I know that all made a difference. It's not palpable. It's not something I can touch, but I knew it was there, because I don't know how else I would have even functioned to the point I was. And you think about, and that whole family grief. So as I said, our daughter Jill was 18, had just gotten set up to go to college, and she did go off to St. Cloud, and it was after the first semester, just needed to come home, and that was, we hoped she would, actually, and she did. But then went on, to go to college, and and how she dealt with it, I think, unfortunately, I think she felt very alone, because as parents, with another child to be concerned about, it's hard, because you're doing what you can to survive yourself, and you have this other young adult, and even those families who are left with younger children. I do remember thinking I was so glad that I didn't have little children to deal with, because I thought, how would I be effective as a mom to little ones, who wouldn't be affected nearly as much by, they are resilient, and they would need different type of care to help them with the loss of a sibling. And with Jill, she kind of, and her friends, kids that age, I don't know how to help each other either. And they were all so devastated because, in that group, Tim was everybody's little brother, just like their brothers were Jill's little, it was just, it was so intertwined that the pain was just, it was so palpable and so intense. So it was hard. And, even to this day, I think Jill has had to just deal with it herself. I mean, she's been married for over 20 years. She's, 3 kids, and, has a good job, and, she's okay, but it certainly changed her life. As she said, I never wanted to be an only child, and we did adopt Brandon, but they are 20 years apart in age, and he has cerebral palsy. So, the type of relationships is very different than she knew she could have had with Tim and his wife and his kids, and all that is not there. It's a big hole, to this day in our family, for sure. Yeah. But the one thing I wanted to mention that we always are very aware of when we work with couples in our grief groups, we have a group called Gone Too Soon, that we facilitate twice a month, and we unfortunately have a lot of couples that do come together, and we always want them to make sure they're figuring out how they're going to do this as a couple, because we know that the rate of divorce is heightened. When this happens, it can take its toll on a marriage, and especially if a marriage is already a little shaky, it can have devastating results. So we talked to them about that, and what Dick and I learned is we learned how to let each other grieve. There could be days when maybe Dick had gone off to work and had a pretty okay day, thought, I'm okay today, to come home and hear me downstairs in Tim's bedroom, hugging his pillow and wailing, and vice versa. I had the same experience with him multiple times, but we learned that it wasn't either of our jobs to try to pull each other out of that pit at that moment, because I think we walk around trying not to get to that point. And then finally, there's nothing left to do but that. And we realized that was part of the grief process, and we had to stand by. As much as we wanted to help each other, knew we couldn't, because for him to come down and say, "Here, wipe your nose, and let's go out to eat. Let's just move on," that wasn't what I needed. I needed to cry till I couldn't cry anymore, And so we learned that, and we really do try to help other couples and they seem to, nod their heads and go, yeah, because I want to help her. It's like, I know you want to help her, but this is a way of helping her or him, so that's one thing I think made a big difference in how we maintained and, our marriage thrived, and we go on together to do these things together with couples, and we're not the people who are afraid to approach someone who's just lost a child. We go towards them, never away from them. So yeah.
Right. And that's one of the things, because I think it's so hard for couples to understand that each person can grieve their own way, and there's not a right way to do it. It's just the way that you're going through it. That is the right way to do it, however it's coming up for you.
Yeah. And just to let alone that you're talking men and women here, and and even to not judge each other's way they do it. I think I've heard that a lot. Well, I don't think he's hurting like I am. He seems to be. It's like, yeah, but you don't know, and I think we put on, especially men, to be strong. They're even told, you got to be strong for her. It's like, why? What about me then? And that's it. Oh, I'm sorry. I got a frog in my throat. Excuse me. I'll just get a glass of water. I'll quit. Okay. Anyway, yeah, because, and we talk about the fact that men, for a lot of men, if they grew up being convinced that big boys don't cry, this whole emotional piece of grief can be really, really hard for guys to do.
Absolutely. Yes. And it's so freeing to be able to hear from somebody else that you get to cry and you get to do it in the way that feels right for you. Yeah. I know we went to Faith Lodge in Wisconsin. Are you familiar?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we've been there. What a beautiful place. Yeah.
It's such a beautiful place. And this was, I think, maybe not a year, maybe 9 months after Dara's passing. And I was just so taken aback because there was a man, right? Because you're just in shock. You're still, you stay in shock for that first year for sure.
You're just numb. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I just remember him saying, I just want this done. I just want it done. I don't want to feel like this anymore. And I just want to be done. And I thought, like, oh my gosh, right. Just, it never even occurred to me to feel like that. All of these different emotions and the different, just trying to find your footing, trying to find a way to be present here on this earth and not having to raise young ones on top of that. Oh my goodness, how difficult that would be.
Yeah. So, I've heard from. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Go right ahead.
Well, I've heard also, from when I encounter people who say, "Yeah, my little brother died when I was 15," and I often say, "And how was that for you? And then what did you see with your mom and dad?" And sadly, more than once or twice, I've heard them say, "I lost my brother, but I lost my mom too." Yeah. Mom was never the same. I lost my mom when he died. It's like, it just makes me want to cry when I hear that. It's like, oh, and then there's that, you think of that poor mom and all the guilt that she put on herself because she knew she couldn't mother her other children. And so we do what we can, right, to keep this from being a spiral downward that they can't find their way out of.
Right. Yes, it's so horribly painful to lose two people when one person passes. Yet to lose two people and even three. The dad also, the mom and Oh my goodness. Now I know that we are going to start running out of time here, and I have like this list of questions that I want to ask you, Donna. And so, of course, I know we've just touched the surface of this conversation. And so I'm wondering would you be willing to come back next week and continue this conversation with me so we can share with the listeners more on your journey and then more about your books and the work that you do to help other people navigate and manage through their grief of losing a loved one.
Certainly, I'd love to do that.
Awesome. I'm so grateful. I am so grateful. Mm-hmm. So in the meantime, I always share with people how, with the listeners, how they can contact you. But I also like to make sure that everybody knows it's in the show notes. So if you're driving, there's no need to worry. But Donna's website is, I just lost it. It's Unfinished by Design, unfinishedbydesign.com. And then she's also on Facebook and Instagram at Unfinished by Design. And I totally love that name. I love that name. So any information that you would like to know about Donna, I know she does speaking. And I'm assuming that, it's COVID. So speaking is probably a little bit different right now. But virtual speaking, I'm assuming you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I do.
So virtual speaking. Okay. And she has on her website the information to be able to contact her about the different speaking services that she does. And then we will, of course, touch into that a little bit more when we come back next week and pick up this conversation. So all of Donna's information will be in the show notes. So you'll be able to, and her books. So you'll be able to get all of that information there. So Donna, thank you so much for being with me today and being so open and honest about the loss of your son. And I do want to know a little bit more about Oleg. We have lots to talk about. And I'm just with my hands on my heart and just holding you and loving you and thanking you so much for being able to share that and being here with us so other people can hang on to somebody else's hope and belief that they can walk through this and, be able to continue living their life and have a beautiful life and carry the person that we lost, carry them right along with us as we continue living our lives to the fullest. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Absolutely. And to the listeners, thank you all so much. And we will be back next week to go on with part 2 with Donna Mathiowetz. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you for spending time with us today. Please go to nadahogan.com for show notes and other information you can use right away. If you like what you heard here, please subscribe to our show and don't forget to rate and review right there on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your shows. And don't forget to tell your friends about it. We'll see you next week.